3 Israeli nationals who landed in Accra on Wednesday. They say they've been compelled to retaliate over what Israel started. Ghanaian authorities have stated this move is a direct response to the alleged mistreatment of Ghanaian travellers in Tel Aviv. Earlier this month, 7 Ghanaians were detained at Israel's Ben Gurion airport. 4 of them were staff from the parliamentary service attending a cybersecurity conference. Accra says their citizens were held for 5 hours without a justifiable explanation. 3 of them were deported, while the rest were released after intense diplomatic pressure. Ghana's foreign minister called the treatment humiliating. He also summoned Israeli embassy officials in Accra and demanded respect for their citizens. His directive was plain and simple: 1 Israeli for every Ghanaian sent back.
The Israeli authorities have now apologized for the action they carried out and have called for de-escalation because we made it clear that if they deported 10 Ghanaians, we will deport 10, 20 will deport 20, 50 will deport 50. We are not going to accept this.
And according to Ghana, the row is linked to Israeli accusations that it wasn't cooperating over deportation procedures. Earlier this year, Israel blamed Ghana's Tel Aviv embassy for not cooperating on 6 deportations. 1 involved a Gabonese national, another was too sick to travel. Ghana rejects that entirely. Their embassy insists it follows international law completely. The tensions also come against the backdrop of Accra's outspoken stance on the Israel-Hamas conflict. The West African nation has always maintained support for a 2-state solution. Earlier in the year, Ghana urged Israel to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza, referring to the reported civilian suffering as heartbreaking. The president also donated 40 tons of Ghana-made cocoa products to Palestine. Accra has also condemned Israeli strikes on Qatar in September as a clear violation of international law. In 2023, the acting Ghanaian president also urged the world to intervene in the Israel-Hamas conflict.
There's clearly a need for us, all of us, the international community, the global community, to look beyond the immediate issues of the consequences of the Hamas attacks on Israel, to be looking at the possibility of a comprehensive settlement of this matter.
Voices from inside the West African nation echo the diplomatic strain as well. Several pro-Palestine protests across the country are calling out the humanitarian crisis in the region.
We cannot sit back and see children being killed, women and children, innocent civilians, irrespective of where they come from, what their religion is, what their race is. So this must stop. We want to add our voices to all those who are saying there is a humanitarian crisis that needs urgent attention.
But Ghana and Israel were not always at odds. The diplomatic ties have history. Ghana was the first sub-Saharan African country to recognize Israel in 1958. Their relation focused on cooperation in agriculture, security, and aviation. In 2021, the Israeli government also invested $140 million in the West African nation, focusing on developing infrastructure and building an AI research institute. For now, both governments say they want to maintain ties, but as 2 nations navigate their diplomatic row, caught in the middle are ordinary citizens, treated like pieces.
Ghana's decision to force the exit of a major Israeli firm marked a turning point that few in Washington expected. For decades, Ghana had been viewed as one of West Africa's most stable and foreign investment-friendly economies. It was a country praised for predictable governance, open markets, and diplomatic balance. That reputation made the sudden shift even more striking. When the government moved to terminate key agreements and revoke operational privileges held by a powerful Israeli-linked company, the message was unmistakable. Ghana was recalibrating its relationship with foreign capital. The move did not happen in isolation. Across Africa, governments have been reassessing the long-term costs and benefits of foreign corporate dominance in strategic sectors. Infrastructure, surveillance technology, security services, mining, energy, and digital systems have all come under renewed scrutiny. Ghana's action reflected a broader continental trend toward economic sovereignty, regulatory assertiveness, and political independence in decision-making. At the center of the controversy was control. Control over data, infrastructure, profits, labor conditions, and national security implications. Ghanaian officials framed the decision as a corrective measure, not a hostile act. They argued that contractual terms had tilted too heavily in favor of the foreign firm, limiting domestic participation and reducing long-term value creation. The government emphasized compliance failures, governance disputes, and national interest concerns as justification. For Washington, the shock came not only from the decision itself but from its geopolitical implications. Israel remains one of America's closest strategic partners, particularly in technology, defense, and intelligence-linked industries. When a U.S.-aligned Israeli firm lost a major foothold in Ghana, it raised questions about shifting influence across West Africa. Diplomats and analysts quickly began asking whether this was an isolated case or a signal of deeper realignment. Ghana's president presented the move as an assertion of sovereignty. He emphasized that foreign partnerships were welcome, but only under conditions that ensured transparency, fairness, and national benefit. In public statements, Ghanaian leadership rejected claims of ideological motivation. Instead, they stressed economic logic and long-term national planning. The Israeli firm at the center of the dispute had operated with significant reach. Its projects were valued in the billions when factoring in long-term contracts, infrastructure access, and future expansion potential. Losing that position overnight represented not just a financial setback but a strategic one. The ripple effects were immediate. Investors began reassessing political risk across the region. Other foreign firms quietly reviewed their contracts, compliance status, and exposure. Inside Ghana, public reaction was largely supportive. Many citizens viewed the decision as overdue. Critics of foreign corporate dominance argued that too much wealth had flowed outward for too long, leaving limited domestic industrial development. Social media discourse framed the move as Ghana finally drawing a line and reclaiming control over its economic future. This was not Ghana's first confrontation with foreign business interests, but it was one of the most visible. What made it different was the global attention it attracted. Israeli media outlets debated the implications. European analysts questioned whether similar actions could spread. In Washington, policy circles discussed the growing difficulty of maintaining influence through private sector channels alone. The episode underscored a changing reality. African states are no longer merely competing for foreign investment at any cost. Many are now willing to sacrifice short-term inflows for long-term leverage. Ghana's economy, diversified across agriculture, gold, oil, cocoa, and services, gave it confidence to absorb potential fallout. Behind the scenes, negotiations were tense. Legal teams weighed arbitration risks. Diplomatic backchannels attempted damage control, but Ghana held firm. Officials signaled that future partnerships would prioritize local equity participation, technology transfer, and stronger regulatory oversight. The decision also resonated within Africa. Leaders in neighboring countries watched closely. Some saw Ghana as testing the waters for a more assertive posture toward powerful foreign firms. Others viewed it as a warning shot to corporations accustomed to favorable treatment. Washington's concern extended beyond Ghana alone. The United States has invested heavily in promoting itself and its allies as preferred partners for Africa, especially as competition with China intensifies. A high-profile loss involving an Israeli firm risked weakening that narrative. It suggested that political alignment does not guarantee economic immunity. Ghana's move came at a time when African nations are increasingly coordinating positions through regional blocs and continental frameworks. The African Continental Free Trade Area has reinforced the idea that domestic value creation matters more than raw foreign inflows. Governments are under pressure from younger populations demanding jobs, accountability, and economic dignity. From an economic perspective, the short-term impact was manageable. Ghana's currency and markets remained stable, export flows continued. This stability strengthened the government's position, signaling that decisive action would not automatically trigger crisis. For the Israeli firm, the loss was significant. Beyond immediate revenue, it represented a reputational challenge. Future bids across Africa could face heightened scrutiny. Competitors, including regional and Asian firms, moved quickly to fill the vacuum. The situation also exposed a broader truth about power in the modern global economy. Influence no longer flows solely through military alliances or diplomatic ties. It flows through contracts, infrastructure, data systems, and regulatory environments. When host nations change the rules, even powerful players must adapt. Ghana's leadership appeared keenly aware of this leverage. By acting decisively, it demonstrated that African governments are increasingly comfortable exercising authority once considered risky. The fear of capital flight, long used as a deterrent, is losing its effectiveness. This moment may ultimately be remembered as part of a larger African recalibration. Not anti-West, not anti-Israel, but firmly pro-sovereignty. A signal that partnerships must evolve or expire. For Washington, the lesson was clear. Engagement strategies based on assumption and alignment need updating. Africa is not a passive arena. It is an active decision-maker, increasingly confident and increasingly selective. As global competition for markets, resources, and influence intensifies, Ghana's move may serve as a case study. It illustrates how middle-income African states can assert control without destabilizing their economies. It also shows how quickly long-standing arrangements can unravel when political priorities shift. What happens next will depend on how foreign governments and corporations respond. Ghana has left the door open to new partnerships, but under new terms. The era of unquestioned access appears to be over. The shock felt in Washington was not about a single firm. It was about the realization that Africa's economic posture is changing faster than many anticipated. Ghana's decision was not a rebellion. It was a declaration, and it may not be the last.
You've been watching Echoes of Africa, where every story carries the sound of tomorrow. If this moved you, subscribe now, like, and share so Africa's voice never fades into silence.